When the Naruto series ended back in 2014, it not only ended a long-running series that lasted for a stunning 17 years of publication, but also an end of a long journey with a character we followed throughout the entire span of his story. A journey where we saw our hero struggle and endure with whatever obstacles came before him, as well as struggle as the underdog that would face many hardships along his long road towards his goal. From his humble beginnings of a lonely and ostracized child, who one day dreamed of becoming a great and respected hero, to finally acquiring all of his wishes and desires he had dreamed when he was a little boy, becoming the leader of his village and gaining the respect and love from all of his peers, as well as finding love from someone he would want to spend the rest of his days with and have the one thing he never had when he was young, a family. For many people, including myself, Naruto became the gateway anime that was really our first series to grow invested in on a weekly basis, but also became the doorway to anime as an entertainment medium and really became the first series that became the jumping on point for our love of anime. Similar to how Dragon Ball Z was when it first came out on Cartoon Network years ago, and people loved it so much that it became the first anime they ever watched, and introduced a whole new generation of fans to an industry as a whole. Selling over 200 million copies worldwide and became one of the most successful manga and anime series in Japan, there's no denying that for many people, this series became a deeply beloved story that was close to many people within their hearts. And I'm not afraid to admit that I do deeply love this series and appreciate what it's done for me over the years I followed it. So when a new series was announced that would be a spiritual successor to Naruto's story and instead follow his son Boruto, many including myself saw it as an opportunity as a start of a new chapter in the Naruto universe and go towards a route that could differentiate from its predecessor and explore new territory that the Naruto series did not do before. For me personally, if there is room for new opportunities to present itself in any spin-off or continuation of any series, then I think it can warrant a continuation within the same universe and explore new ideas and possibilities that can help be its own thing instead of copying from the show it's based off from. Boruto the anime is a series that works as a prequel to Boruto the movie, that follows the story of Boruto Uzumaki, the son of the 7th Hokage and protagonist of the original series, Naruto Uzumaki. It explores Boruto's academy days before he achieved the rank of Genin, and introduces Boruto's development of his growth as a ninja and delves into his character a bit more than what we saw in the Boruto movie. While many people, including myself, enjoyed what the Boruto movie offered and thought it did a fairly well job in introducing these new cast of characters, who are the new generation of shinobi and offsprings of the original cast, one of the things I had wanted more of this new story was to explore more of Boruto's character, as well as the other new characters like Mitsuki and Sarada. I felt like this would be a great way to kind of reinvigorate the series and continue off with a new fresh cast of characters who could become their own identities instead of following the same path as their predecessors before them. While opinion on the series has been polarizing as of late, and while I can understand the faults and negatives with how the story can feel as though it drags at some points, I couldn't help but find myself enjoying the positives of what this series offered as a whole, and the potential it brought to differentiate itself from the series before. We start the series off by introducing a sort of fast forward into the future as we see the Leaf Village in chaos and disarray, as though a great battle was fought at some point in the series. Then we see an older and more mature looking Boruto fighting against another shinobi that seems to be responsible for the damage we see in the Leaf Village. What I liked about this scene and why it drew me in was how the intro seemed to tease Boruto's evolution and development as his character progresses on into his own story, as well as signifying the dark direction the story will eventually turn down the road and how it will affect Boruto's development in the future. One of the things that works strongly for this series, and one of the reasons I really enjoyed the Boruto movie as a whole, is the way it was able to differentiate Boruto's character from his father. While there are some people that would argue that Boruto as a character is too similar to Naruto, the biggest aspect that differentiates these two characters are their viewpoints on what being a ninja really means. And a large factor of that difference is the background and environment Boruto and Naruto grew up in. For Naruto, it was his isolated and lonely life that served as a motivator and a catalyst for him wanting to become Hokage. He never had a family and was ostracized by the entire village and his peers. It was his need to find acceptance and forge relationships that gave him the reason to want to become the very best ninja he could be. He never fooled himself into believing that things would get easy for him and go his way if he worked towards his goal, and understood that it would take hard work on his part if he ever wanted to achieve his dreams of being Hokage one day. While he did have the Nine Tails that helped him throughout his many battles and was a source of his own power, Naruto still had to find ways to control it and make it his own. He wasn't a prodigy or a genius like Sasuke. He still had to work hard with whatever was thrown at him. That's why when we as the viewers saw Naruto face any obstacles that came before him, We were able to root for him as the underdog of his own story, which is why when we see him accomplish his goals and gain everything he ever wanted when he was a child, there's a sense of satisfaction from us as viewers for watching his journey up to that point. For Naruto, he knew that the road laid out before him was not a feat that he would be able to navigate quickly or easily. He understood the hard work and dedication it would take on his part in order to finally obtain his goal. That, as well as the time period he grew up in, where ninja were still a necessity to maintain power and balance in villages and nations, were environments that helped shape Naruto's character and help him develop throughout the narrative. This is a complete contrast to how Boruto's character was explored slightly in the Boruto movie and is expanded on in the Boruto anime. For instance, his lifestyle and upbringings were completely different to how Naruto grew up, as well as the environment he is living in being a more peaceful and stable world than it was in Naruto's story. Ninjas aren't really used as military deterrents like they were in the past, and most children who study ninjutsu at the academy have the option of either becoming a ninja or using their new talents in ninjutsu to work in normal labor jobs. Because there isn't any war or conflict within the neighboring villages and peace has become a stable reality, the idea of what it means to be a ninja is completely different to how it was perceived during Naruto's story, an idea that Boruto adopts fairly openly in this series and becomes his whole ideological worldview on the ninja world as a whole. For Boruto, he doesn't really see any point in becoming a ninja when there really isn't a point in their existence to begin with. He is widely successful in his studies, and rarely do we see him put in any effort in his academic work. And when asked what kind of ninja he wants to be, he doesn't give a definite answer and admits that he doesn't really have an idea what kind of ninja or shinobi he wants to become. It's an aspect of his character that was slightly explored in the Boruto movie but is expanded more in the anime. It also made me appreciate how different Boruto was from Naruto. It would have been easy to have Boruto share every single aspect of his personality from his father and have him completely identical to him. But here, it gives us a character who, for all intents and purposes, is nothing like Naruto at all. And the anime does a good job in hitting home that this type of thinking will eventually get Boruto and his friends killed. One of my favorite episodes from Boruto is the episode where Kakashi gets reintroduced into the series, where he plays as a proctor to Boruto and his friends' academy graduation exam. Throughout the episode, Kakashi constantly makes a point in saying that the newer generation of ninja are inadequate compared to the previous generation, and just flat out says that these new up-and-coming ninja are awful because of how little they take seriously of the ninja world and how small their understanding of how the world actually is. What I liked about this episode and why I think it's one of the strongest of the series was just how it basically addresses some of the problems people have with the series and acknowledges it. There are fans who complain about how the new cast of characters in Boruto being weak or inadequate compared to the old cast in the original Naruto series, where we saw the older characters as these strong and talented young ninja who almost always faced the dangers and risk of death from enemies around them, where even as 12-year-olds they experienced life and death situations and were constantly on the brink of war with other villages, and because of these factors it forced the older characters to grow stronger and more wiser of the world around them. While the anime addresses the shortcomings of these new characters and how they are significantly weaker compared to the old cast, one of the biggest aspects and themes that the show explores is the idea of how a child has such a narrow-minded and naive view of the world around them, and how because of that, they believe that no matter what, things are just going to go their way. It's a thought process that is adopted very heavily in Boruto's character whenever he is seen brushing off his problems as something that will eventually work itself out in his favor. It's a view of the world from the perspective of a child who doesn't know any better of the dangers that life can throw at them at any moment. And throughout the episodes, the story has Boruto become constantly reminded how this arrogance and type of thinking will almost always lead Boruto to failure or the risk of death. It also becomes an important factor with Boruto's development as a whole, because as the story lets him see his mistakes and learn from them, he becomes more aware of the world around him and sees the hardships and difficulties it really takes to walk the path of a ninja. So when I see people that complain about Boruto as a character and say that he is either too arrogant or too full of himself in his own abilities and skill, I think people miss the point of how that aspect of his character is intentional and how even the story reminds him of that fault in his personality. We as fans of the original series have seen how deadly the ninja world can be, from the fights and battles we've witnessed the older characters face when they were young to the near life and death experiences they had to go through with each battle they fought. We know how cruel and unrelenting life as a shinobi can be, However, because of the peaceful life Boruto has lived and how ninjas aren't a necessity as fighters or as soldiers anymore and can live a life that is beyond just fighting, I think it's easy for a child like him to grow confident in his own abilities when he doesn't realize just how dangerous the world can actually be. It's when he learns from his mistakes that his growth as a character becomes more satisfying to watch. Another aspect of this anime that makes me appreciate it more so than the Boruto movie is how it fleshes out Boruto as a character and gives us more time to see what kind of person he is through his actions and interactions with the other characters. In the Boruto movie, while it did a good job in introducing us to his character and see what kind of person he was, 2 hours can only do so much, and we really never got to see his character more fleshed out and see more of his personality and development throughout the story. In the anime, as we see him interact with some of the other characters, we were able to see a side of him that wasn't present as much as it was in the Boruto movie. Here, he's seen as someone who, while skilled and confident in his abilities, is never shown to have any kind of mentality of feeling superior compared to his classmates. He's a kind-hearted kid who is devoted to his friends and is able to get along with mostly everyone he interacts with, even when he is seen to have skills that are clearly more superior than the other students of the academy. He never uses that as an excuse to discourage them from their own worth and actually encourages them to remember their own skill and abilities, as well as helping them with whatever problems they might have. These scenes of Boruto being helpful to his friends and actually show him being the good, kind-hearted kid he is made me like and appreciate his character even more than I already did in the Boruto movie. It adds more layers to his character than what most fans previously thought of him, such as being selfish or arrogant. And to be quite honest, watching him have some of the best looking fight scenes in the series were also an added plus to making me like him even more. I mean seriously, this show has some great fights that almost compares to some of the awesome fighting we saw in the original Naruto series. He is also shown to deeply love his family, and one of the major positives and enjoyments I found with this series is how it shows us Boruto's interaction with his family, most notably his interactions with Naruto. One big complaint some people had with Boruto's character in the Boruto movie was how he had this almost bitter relationship with his father, and how he held some kind of resentment towards him because of how he is almost never present in his life, because of his duties as Hokage. Personally, that wasn't what I got out of the movie, and I thought it did a fairly good job in explaining Boruto's reasons for being upset with Naruto. But in the anime, it does a really good job in expanding on Naruto and Boruto's relationship as father and son, and portrays it in a way that, while Boruto is shown to still feel upset about his father not being around most of the time, he is also shown to still hold a deep respect for him. He does on occasions berate and shame his father for not being home most of the time. He does, however, demonstrate a deep admiration for his father whenever he is in need of advice and needs to come to him for guidance or help. I think the best episode that perfectly encompasses everything I love about the relationship between these two is episode 18, titled A Day in the Life of the Uzumaki Family, in which the second half of the episode consists of Naruto and Boruto eating out together, and you just see how genuine their relationship really is. It becomes apparent that it's been a while since these two have actually sat down and eaten together, as shown by how awkward their atmosphere feels most of the time. But it also encompasses their desire to grow close to each other. While Naruto feels awkward with just him and Boruto eating, he makes an effort to try and get close to him as his father. This is a great episode because it shows Naruto and Boruto really bond like father and son, and shows some really relatable scenes that I think almost anyone with this kind of relationship can understand on a personal level. Little things like Naruto asking Boruto how things are going in the academy and making an effort to learning more about his son's personal life, or realizing his interests and hobbies that he didn't know before. All the while showing Boruto's awkward need to want to be close with his father, but has difficulties expressing his emotions and feelings about it. It's sweet and endearing scenes like these that not only show us what a grown-up Naruto would be like as a father, but also the complex and deep relationship that both Naruto and Boruto share. It's not an episode that has some kind of epic fight or important exposition to the plot. It's just a deeply sincere portrayal of a father and son growing close to one another, with great character interaction and development for these two. Lastly, the biggest enjoyment I found with this series was the reintroduction of older characters and seeing them as parents or mentors to the new generation of characters. I believe a story can feel more special and more invested when you grow up alongside the characters you're watching and witness them enter into a whole different world towards adulthood, just as you are in your own life. when characters you're following alongside with grow and change over time just as you are with your own development and progression. It was that aspect of the story that made me love the original series in the first place, where I could watch these young characters who were not much older than me continue to change and develop throughout their lives. So seeing these characters that I grew to love in my younger years and whom I grew up with as I continued to follow the series, and seeing them as adults who are not only more experienced but also wiser, brings a sense of coming to full circle with these characters and their character arcs, where they have grown past being students seeking guidance and instead have become the masters and teachers themselves. While they never take up the main focus of the series and they only serve as secondary characters to the main cast, there is a sense of satisfaction once realizing that the characters you've grown attached to for so long have become full-fledged adults, as well as entering into a whole new world of their lives as parents, where the newer generation look to them for guidance and reassurance, similar to how the original characters would look to the older adults whenever they needed someone more wiser or older to give them wisdom or advice. Seeing these characters going through the responsibilities of being a parent and experiencing any challenges or issues that any parent would try their hardest to overcome gives characters like Naruto layers to their growth and development that you just appreciate seeing. Challenges such as making sure you never say the wrong thing to a child because of how impressionable and naive they are to the world, or doing your hardest as a parent to guide your child towards the right path but never feeling like you're doing enough, or feeling like you're not being the best parent you can be for your child. It's a theme that has become constantly synonymous with the entire series as a whole, which is the idea of family and how those you look up to, whether they may be your parent or someone you look up to as a role model, can shape who you are as a person and can have a major impact towards your development in the future. Boruto continues that idea by introducing the familiarity of the older characters and setting them in a role where they aren't the naive and impressionable children they were before, who were constantly learning more about the world around them as they grew older, and sees them as full-grown adults who now have a better understanding of life and act as role models offering guidance to the new generation. Whenever a sequel or spin-off is followed by an original work that is so beloved and popular among so many people, it's difficult to not want to compare that new story from the previous one and see how different or similar it is from its predecessor. And I think the one thing that sets apart Boruto from Naruto is that it's trying to move out of the shadow of what came before and try new things that the original didn't attempt. That could also work as a metaphor for Boruto as a character, as he is constantly trying to forge his own path and becoming an individual who is different from his father. But it's these differences that separate both these characters that allows these new stories to flourish and explore new possibilities that sets itself apart from the original, such as watching new characters grow and develop their own story arcs and watching them learn more about life and how sometimes there will be challenges and hardships that they will have to face and persevere. And I believe that Boruto succeeds in shaping into its own identity by exploring new ideas and not treading into familiar territory that would make itself a carbon copy of the original Naruto. Is it a perfect series? Absolutely not, and I will admit that there are episodes and stories that do feel like they drag on sometimes, and I do wish that the pacing was a little faster. But for me, the positives that this series displays more than outweighs the problems I have with it. I enjoy watching Boruto's development and seeing him realize that sometimes life just isn't easy and he can't just skim through it like everything will just work out for him in the end. I enjoy watching the older characters like Naruto and Sakura as parents and seeing their interaction with their families, as well as offering advice to their children and becoming their source of guidance for them. It's positives like these that make me appreciate this series so much more and makes me excited for the possibilities in the future and what that might entail. Overall, the importance of this series equates to the new stories it can tell that can expand its universe as a whole and continue on by showing us new story arcs of new characters. It might not make me love it more than the original Naruto, and there are probably some things in the series that worked better in the original. But the fact that I can continue the story that I loved as a kid and experience new stories and new developments through the new and older characters is something that I think makes the series worth watching. After all, why not wait and see what new things bring to the table, and see how they can forge their own identities and bring something different. And that's gonna be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm still relatively new here on YouTube, so I hope that my first ever video on here left a good impression on all of you. And if you like this video and you want to see more videos like this, where I talk about anime in depth, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching the video guys, and I hope to see you all later.